Good morning. Happy to share with you this morning some thoughts on the process of the egoic mind, which is a conditioning that supports individuals to operate in the world, become a useful cog in the wheel of society, but it requires a system of denial and projection. Those are the two tools used by the ego. So one of the ways that this works is, again, a self-protective mechanism that would protect one from fear, self-hatred, certain things by denying the pain initially, and then projecting onto other persons, situations, the reason for the pain. So we basically defending ourselves, denial being the shield and then projection being the sword, so we can blame others, certain situations, for the difficulties of our life, for the pain that we feel. So it's very basic part of our psychological development, and the bigger problem with the egoic process of denial is that we tend to deny our glory. We deny our power, our authority, and then institutions are happy to make up authorities, other authorities that we would again then project our authority onto. We don't have it, but other authorities, including the Christian version of God, and other religions have their own model of projection, denial and projection of our spiritual authority. So I remember quite a number of years ago when I was earnestly beginning my process of recovery and opening myself to the full reality that I was destined to come to know it. I read one particular book, kind of popped out at me. I won't spend a lot of time in used bookstores buying these little paperback books. And this one that popped out at me was a book by U.S. Anderson titled 3 Magic Words. And it was pretty amazing for me. I think it was really one of the first times that I was reading something that started resonating in me so deeply. I remember feeling this sort of vibratory excitement when I was getting aware of what these 3 magic words were. And then when I finally read them, I forget if the words are "you are God" or "I am God," but 3 magic words that really point directly to this process of removing the egoic shield and sword of denial and projection and accepting the full authority for our reality. Okay, shortly after reading Anderson's book, I stumbled upon Jane Roberts, who's a channeler at the time. People back then, that was kind of a big thing in the time that people were starting to channel these entities. And so Jane Roberts was channeling Seth. And I just remember just reading the book, the Seth material, but I think it was the nature of personal reality. It was, again, this beautiful affirmation of what I knew deep in my soul, but what I was learning, that I'm 100% responsible for my reality. This is what Seth was very clear about, 100%. So the idea that you take back this projection and take ownership of like, wow, so all of my pain, I'm 100% responsible for that. I mean, herein is now the motivation for change, okay? If we can keep blaming, projecting and blaming and, carrying on this illusion that my unhappiness, my discomfort, my failures, my whatever is caused by external events, then yeah, it's where most people hide. Most people just have that egoic system in place, and it's pretty sad to see as they get older. I mean, the lucky ones that crumbles and they open themselves to a level of forgiveness and blessing and whatever is possible. I mean, I was lucky that this was happening for me in my middle 30s, and yeah, big process. I mean, I remember, in fact, another channeler that I enjoyed a lot was Pat Rodegast, that was channeling Emmanuel. And it was really interesting. I think it was in this time, 1986, I went through treatment in late 85, 86, spent 6 months in a halfway house, and then moved to Amherst, Massachusetts to start studying the Course in Miracles with Claire Ludlow. But somewhere along that time, it was probably in late 1986, I'd been to Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York, a few times to listen to different people talking about these new ideas. And I remember this one, they had a program in the wintertime in the Virgin Islands, St. John. And I remember going down there because George Leonard was one of the speakers. He actually became like an Aikido master, and his talk was more on Aikido than education and ecstasy. He was one of the really great thinkers, along with Joseph Chilton Pearce and a few others, about education, about how we could transform our educational system. And anyway, I went down to spend time with George Leonard, but as it turned out, this person I didn't know yet, Pat Rodegast, was there. She's channeling Emmanuel. It was interesting, after one day with George Leonard, I thought, this doesn't feel like the cutting edge thing for me right now. I'm going to check out this woman, Pat Rodegast. And so for the last 5 days or 4 days of the 5-day retreat, I was sitting with her. And I remember the first time that she invited anyone in the audience to ask a question directly to Emmanuel through her. And I remember asking Emmanuel a question. I can't remember now what that question was, but I remember the response was so powerful because it didn't come from this woman. It came from this universal mind that she was naming Emmanuel. And it was just like this universal mind knew my radiant truth so well. It answered my question in a totally different way than I could have expected. But I remember just being floored, like, wow. It's like this radiant truth was starting to wake up inside of me, and I was getting affirmations right and left. So the key for us, this whole conscious living thing that I'm about is in this OASIS experience, is about this shift from the egoic mind with all of its defensive mechanisms into this open spiritual mind where we're receiving directly from the universe information, powerful truth, and that truth is informing our lives, and we become magnificent manifestors because this is what the universe wants for everybody. I remember Marianne Williamson just saying, quote from a course or from her book, The Return to Love, I believe, where she was saying, you're not really afraid of your littleness. You're afraid of your grandeur. You're afraid of your glory. And that is so true. I mean, it's more comfortable for people to be in that egoic cocoon where it's like, oh, well, you know, this is just sort of the way life is with our frustrations and failures, and we've got places to blame, and there you go. But now with this shift, it's like when you say, wow, I'm 100% responsible for my reality, and the universe in all of its power, you know, the unmanifested, as Eckhart Tolle described God, seeks to use me as a portal, a conduit, through which it would manifest. And those manifestations are always going to be the best possible thing for my life, because it's our highest expression. It's what we're designed, destined to do, is to be these powerful manifestors. So I know also there's the whole Abraham Hicks, all of those, all of that teaching basically is essentially the same thing, that just talks about this magnificence that wants to use us for its expression. And in doing so, if we're willing to serve in this expression, we will have a great life and find true happiness and peace of mind. Talked before the last talk about specialness, and so we talked about this shift being the end of specialness. You know, specialness is just this, again, this egoic process of denial and then projection, and creating these special relationships, special love, special hate, that have to do with this projection, and ending that, you know, reversing that way of thinking, where we shift from having special relationships into having our relationship really being fundamentally with our source, okay, with the unmanifested, with the divine energetic principle of the universe. That's our core relationship. And then our world is simply a place for expression, a place for giving too. Remember, forgiveness is that shift from seeing the world as a place for getting from. If we forget our true nature, we need to get things, so we're projecting this need onto the world, seeing the world as the source of our needs being fulfilled, whereas this reversal, now it's all coming from within. It's coming from the spiritual dimension, and now instead of seeing the world in a needy way, we see the world from a position of true abundance, where we have infinite amounts of creativity and enthusiasm, love and compassion to give, to extend to our world. So it's a magnificent process, this reversal. This is, you know, really what I'm calling the OASIS experience, is this moment where we fully grok, we fully get this shift. Like when I first read the 3 magic words, I am God. Meaning, you know, I am the expression. I am like in this relationship. It's like God and ourselves become one, in that we are deeply intertwined in this process, like chicken or the egg. You know, what comes first? Does the unmanifested seek manifestation, or do I seek to be a manifester? Either way, it's the same thing. I mean, we are called, and I believe that that's a sense that we're, you know, born with this innate knowing that easily gets covered up by all of our conditioning. But deep inside ourselves, we know that the purpose of our lives is to become this brilliant manifester, that we are meant to be highly creative, highly enthusiastic, highly happy beings, okay? Again, using the body, using the person as a device, communication device, but our identity clearly shifts to this spiritual divine relationship. That is the core, that is the foundation of everything we do. And then the world just becomes this beautiful opportunity every day, a beautiful opportunity to give, to express. I mean, just imagine if you're an artist and you're sitting before a blank canvas. To the artist, that's a pretty lovely, exciting feeling, like, wow, here it is. Now, this space, this canvas sitting on the easel, gives me the opportunity to express. As a writer, I'm not a painter, but I'm a writer. Always in my life, when I began a book, it was like, wow, it's amazing. It's amazing to sort of sit back, because most of my writing was memoir type and didn't have to have a lot of research, a lot of notes, but just sitting before the blank page, if I'm making notes, or in the beginning, using a typewriter, eventually shifting to a computer screen. But again, just this idea that, wow, I get to do this. I get to, and I can just remember sometimes when what would flow through me was so profound, so beautiful. I mean, I would just be crying out of joy to see this radiant truth expressing itself in front of my eyes. And it was very clear that always, people used to call themselves channels and all that, but always that's the nature of this transmission. It feels as if we're receiving it from another realm, another entity. It's really just this one thing that's difficult to fully comprehend, so people make up different ideas about it. But there is this universal mind, this source, this unmanifested, it's in the timeless realm, so there's no definition to it. And that's why anybody's attempts to describe this, I mean, it can't be a being, it can't be an entity, because there's no beings, there's no entities in the timeless realm. There's no separation. So again, our mind can't fathom this. And this is why, again, we have to find ways to quiet the chatter, the egoic mind, that would clearly argue against this. I mean, the ego's designed, okay, to protect us from this invasion, whether it's pain or whether it's glory. Either way, the ego is designed to protect us from this powerful, radiant truth. So, again, in our evolution, it was necessary as tribal creatures in order to move forward in our development as a person, that the needs of the culture, the needs of society changed to the point where it was important that we had a higher development of our mental abilities. And this included all of this, psychological development. I mean, think back, it's only been, 150, 200 years that there's been even a science of psychology, of understanding how we think, and the problems that we might have with our emotional mental states. So psychology, psychiatry, all of these things now, it's pretty amazing how much the conditioned world has fought against this other thing that was happening with our evolution, that we would start awakening and start realizing the true nature of power. The conditioned world does not want us to claim this power. Clearly, they have no control over us. So what we see in the world now are this really amazing flowering that at the same time that hundreds of thousands and hopefully many millions of us are awakening to this power, we become no longer useful cogs in the machine. We become actually an enemy of the machine. But we see the machine actually crumbling because this power, like I've talked about so often, okay, on the scale, 800, 600, 400, 200, this power is 1,000,000 times greater than what's vibrating at the level of fear and those that can be easily controlled by the machine, the tribal people. Like I say, their time is short yet on the planet because they're very expendable. They're not necessary anymore. Technology will take over their role as doing simple labor. But those that are vibrating at 400, the intellectual brains, there's where the big battle is, because the machine that wants to control them, they've got an agenda saying, well, I don't know if I want to be controlled. And but again, the solution is what we're talking about, a new earth that begins at the vibrational level of 600, that is really all about seeing what's really happening. Okay, so the dissolution of the machine is the direct result of the awakening that began, at least in my understanding of these last 100 years of our existence as Homo sapiens, that almost halfway through that process in the middle 1960s, this thing began. It began accelerating. That many people. I mean, I'm looking at these individuals that made these contributions. U.S. Anderson, he was born in 1917. Jane Roberts, 1929. Pat Rodriguez, 1926. So these individuals, and of course many others, were all born around the same time as my mother was born. So one generation before me, these individuals were born that would help begin this process in the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s. And again, it's interesting, you look back and go, okay, back then they needed to make up this story, just like Christians made up stories about Jesus. And these people had to make up stories about these different entities, including Helen Schuckman with A Course in Miracles. It was the teacher identified himself as Jesus. Well, now, if you are directly connected to that energetic source, it wouldn't any longer call itself Jesus. It would say, well, I used that at the time because that would help you understand that we were looking again at some of the teachings that the historical Jesus made, and what's because the Bible, Christianity has been a pretty powerful influence in the world. So, of course, Miracles was here to undo that influence and kind of tell the real story. The real story, of course, Miracles is the same thing. Remember, I shared one of my talks about the dream, the helicopter dream. I mean, it's like the point of A Course in Miracles is to teach us that we are, we use the term God, we are the Christ. We are the emissary. We are the part of the Trinity, okay, with the Father in the Christian terminology, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, okay, that's what we are. And, the whole Christian idea of the second coming of the Christ, obviously many evangelical Christians, they believe that's a real thing, that Jesus is going to return, where in fact, I know, that we are it. We are the second coming. This is what was clearly stated in A Course in Miracles that Course in Miracles basically said that it was a significant part of the second coming. It was like the instruction manual for the second coming. And the second coming would be these 1,000 points of light, the many of us around the globe that would wake up and recognize exactly what the Christ energy is and be that. Okay, we are that. Okay, 3 magic words. We are that. If you look at any mystical tradition, always there's a pointer to I am that. There's nothing more. When you realize that, when you can say that in whatever language and whatever words, but I am that. I am that which I have been seeking. Okay, so if I have this talk, seeking and finding. Finding is waking up to, it's not outside of me, it's inside me. I am that. This is the source. It comes through me. Again, you can imagine it coming from this other place, but the other place really doesn't exist. It's not a place, but the timeless realm. Outside of this space-time world is this universal consciousness that is instructing me, is feeding me, is filling me. It's the answer to anything that I've ever sought. And then, like I said, then the world, you, my family, this place, everything just becomes a playground, a place in which I am invited to play, to participate, to give my highest creative gifts. And in that simple function is my happiness, okay? Our function is our happiness. And fulfilling this function is utterly simple. There's nothing to figure out. There's nothing to find. It will be shown to us exactly. We can look back over our story and go, wow, wasn't it interesting that I moved in this direction and this influence came into my life, that all these things would inform me as to how, where, with whom. It really doesn't matter. It would not matter one iota where on the globe I'm sitting right now. Because look at the technology has made it irrelevant. It's a hard word, irrelevant where on the globe I'm sitting. As it is, I chose Ecuador, a pretty sweet place to be, but it doesn't matter any longer. It does not matter. What matters is that we are connecting, just like we're being fed by the timeless realm. We've created this technology now that has made time and space easy. Okay, it used to be that if you wanted to sit with a teacher, you'd have to go to great lengths, great expense. I mean, I think back to me going to the St. John Virgin Islands to encounter Pat Rodegast and Emmanuel. That's not necessary any longer. Any of these teachers out there, any of these bright lights, I'm sure all of them are available now for free via this technology. That's a great thing. It's an amazing thing. And like I said before, I think that was the highest function, purpose of the Homo sapien aspect of our evolution, that the big brain that could figure out technology and do one thing really, really well, improving our ability to communicate, which again is what we are as a person in a body. The function of the person in the body is to communicate. Hello, hello. It's a device to communicate this one powerful truth, 3 magic words. We are that. It solves every problem that could ever exist on the planet, knowing that we hold the power, knowing that we hold the energetic solution to everything. Okay. So just trust in that as we move forward in this amazing time of transformation, as certain things appear to be going crazy all around us, around the world. See, little by little, see how it's an essential part of one thing. There's one thing going on, and that's our full flowering as the new species, Homo glimius, Homo spiritus. Okay? So trust in that. Have a beautiful day, and I'll see you again tomorrow, which will be today.